Hello, it's Alpha here, and today we are going to be talking about Velara's PvP performance. So this is going to be first impression of her on the regular arena, but do keep in mind that this is recorded on the Pioneer server, so technically some things could change between now and when she's actually released. So Velara is the newest Wilder support hero, and she is a magic damage dealer with range of 5. And in her preview trailer, they mentioned that she will specialize in Dream Realm and AFK stages, so she's kind of not necessarily supposed to be that good in PvP, but we are going to be testing her PvP viability anyway. So let's start with the ultimate, because it's kind of important to understand what the ultimate does before we can talk about the other abilities. The ultimate has a passive effect that when the battle starts, Velara will create 4 circles on the battlefield, and pretty much all of her abilities work around these circles, so they are very important to understand how the circles work. And the circles are not active at the start of the fight, but throughout the battle she is able to awaken the circles, and whenever a circle is active, it will heal all of the allies who are within 2 tiles of the circle, and it will reduce the haste of all of the enemies who are within the 2 tiles of the circle. So the same circle can at the same time heal allies and reduce haste of enemies if there are like allies and enemies within the 2 tiles of that circle. Now the haste reduction number is quite big. I think it's 50 haste. So that is like a pretty big amount, so it can be quite nice to reduce the haste of the enemies. And the healing number is decent. It's not as good as something like Smokey or Ludovic, but it's still like a decent amount of healing. So here you can see in this picture like the kind of like the healing amount that Smokey or Ludovic does. So you can see that it's about half of the healing that Smokey and Ludovic does. But it is still a decent amount of healing, and it's constantly happening. So with something like Smokey, for example, if Smokey gets crowd controlled, obviously he will stop healing, but the circle is going to be like staying active throughout the whole battle. And with like Ludovic, for example, Ludovic can move the healing area to other allies, but that means that the healing area is constantly moving, whereas with Velara, the healing area will always stay there. So that can be very good with heroes that are not going to be moving throughout the battle. So if your whole team is going to be like range heroes with long range and they're going to be staying inside the healing area, then it's going to be quite effective way to heal your whole team throughout the whole fight. Okay, so that is the passive part of the ultimate, that she will create these circles at the start of the fight. And if the circles are active, they will heal or reduce haste. And then the active part of this ultimate is that whenever she casts her ultimate, she will awaken one of the circles. And then if all of the 4 circles are awakened, they will actually expand so that the circles will cover the whole map. So when the whole map is covered by the circle, that means that wherever the enemies and allies are, the enemies will have their haste reduced and the allies will be healed by the circle. And also when this happens, she will steal 30% of the enemy's base stats and give those distributed to your team. So pretty much if that is going to happen, you are most likely going to win. But we could talk about that a little bit later, because it's not going to happen in PvP. Okay, so yeah, let's talk a bit more about the circle mechanic, because it's like important for how she works. So the circles are always going to be placed at the 4 corners of the map. So here are some examples that you can see. It changes based on map, but it's always at the corners. And like I said, pretty much everything in her kit works around these circles. But the issue is that for PvP especially, she is really slow at awakening these circles. Even if you kind of like try to make it so that she can do it faster. There are like a couple ways that you can make it faster, but even then it is usually going to be so that you will only awaken 1 or 2 of the circles during the fight. The other thing about this circle mechanic is that it is quite restrictive when it comes to your hero placement, because if you want to get the healing effect from these circles, like we said, you have to have the heroes, your own heroes, within 2 tiles of the circle, the center of the circle. So that means that you kind of like have to place your heroes around the circle, or if you want to get the haste reduction on the enemies have to be like around the circle. And also there is the fact that the circles are gonna stay in one place throughout the whole battle, which is a good thing and a bad thing, because if you are like playing heroes that are like melee heroes or short range heroes, they will move out of the circles area, and then the healing is obviously not going to affect them because they're moving out. So some short range heroes like Shemira, for example, has quite short range. She has a range of 4 or something. So I think in some situations that can mean that she will actually move like out of this healing area. So one good thing about these circles is that even if Velara dies during the fight, the circles will stay active throughout the whole fight. So let's say that you are like using the circle to heal your team and your Velara dies quite early in the fight. The circle should be still healing your team throughout the fight as long as they stay within the circle's area. And one extra thing is that, like I said, the activated circles will heal allies, but they will reduce the haste of the enemies. And the same circle can do both things. So if you have something like this, for example, it means that the area that I have kind of like highlighted with the red, the enemies within that area will have their haste reduced, and then your melee hero walks into that area, so they will have the healing effect of the circle. So it can be quite nice to get the both benefits. Like that's kind of like one way to maximize the activated circles that she creates. Okay, so now that we hopefully understand how the circles work, we can talk about the other abilities a little bit. They're not as important, but anyway, her second ability is called Sinbound Shackles, and this is like the only skill or ability that she has that is not related to the circles. So after 5 seconds, this ability has an initial cooldown of 5 seconds. She will target the enemy with the highest damage dealt, and she will immobilize that target, and she will reduce the haste and defense of that target. And the haste reduction is really big amount of haste, so it's like 70 haste or something. And the defense reduction is also really big, so it's like 70 defense, magic and physical defense reduction. So it's quite noticeable. So one thing I will say about this ability is that it kind of sounds nice to have the haste and defense reduction. And it has like a decent targeting because it will target the enemy who has dealt the highest amount of damage. But it's really hard to tell how effective these kind of abilities are within the fight, because you don't, like, if you're trying to look at the replays, you can't even like see who was kind of like targeted, and even if you know who was targeted, it's still like quite difficult to say how important the haste reduction was throughout the fight. So I don't really know how good this ability is. It sounds nice if you're like able to target something like I guess Ophelia, making her a bit slower, or Shemira, making her a bit slower and easier to kill, so maybe it can be useful. Then her second ability is called Merciful Harvest, and this is not actually an active ability, it's also a passive ability. So with this one, she will awaken one of the circles when the battle starts. So whenever the battle starts, you will automatically awaken one of the circles. So this is very nice, because that means that you can start the fight by constantly healing your team, or you can choose to start the fight by reducing the haste of the enemies. So based on where you place your Velara at the start of the fight, she will select one of the circles and activate it right away. So if you place her inside one of the circles on your side of the map, she will activate that one. So that is what you want to do if you want to use her as a healer, or if you place her anywhere like outside the circles on your side of the map, she will awaken one of the circles on the enemy side of the map. Now, one thing about the placement is that it like I said, it is quite restrictive, because if you want to use her as a healer, you actually have to place her in that one specific spot, which means that you can't really use her, for example, inside the twins link, because the spot is always like at the edge of the map. Then we have her Mythic Plus ability, Graceful Edict, and this ability says that whenever one of the circles is activated, it will target the weakest unit within 2 tiles. So this can be an allied unit or enemy unit, it doesn't matter. Whoever is the weakest within 2 tiles of the activated circle. Then if it's an allied unit, they will gain a shield. If it's an enemy unit, they will take some damage. And then this ability has a second part, which is that every 10 seconds, all of the awakened circles will do the same effect to the weakest unit. So once again, if it's allied unit, every 10 seconds, these awakened circles will give a shield to those allies unit, or if it's an enemy unit, they will do some damage. So a couple of things I will say about this ability. The damage that she does is pretty much non-existent, at least from what I've seen. So the damage part of this ability doesn't really matter at all. The shielding is nice. The shield is pretty decent size shield. So that is the Mythic Plus ability. And then her enhanced force is that if you are able to awaken all of the circles, then that area will also give your heroes like unaffected, and it will give your heroes damage boost. But this, you can pretty much ignore this because it's not going to happen. So her Supreme Plus ability doesn't really do much on PvP. Okay, so now that you hopefully kind of understand what she's able to do, and basically what she's able to do is she's able to heal your allies who are within the circle, or she's able to reduce the haste of the enemies who are within the circle, and then sometimes give shields to your allies. Do I think that Velara is bad for PvP? I would say that she's probably not what you initially thought that she would be based on the abilities, because her skills have all kind of things like stealing the stats from the enemies and providing damage buff to your team and providing crowd control immunity to the team and creating this big circle that will cover the whole map or whatever. But in reality, what she just does is the healing and the haste reduction, because you're not going to be able to like activate that many of the circles. So if you think about it that way, then she's actually very similar to what Ludovic is able to do in a fight. So I think that she kind of fits into same situations that Ludovic does. Both will be able to do like instant healing on your team, and that is going to be the main thing that they're going to be doing. Now the benefits for Velara's case is that the healing will stay in that same spot throughout the whole fight, no matter what happens. So even if she dies, she's still able to do some healing. Or like Ludovic, for example, moves the healing area around, like I said, but she's going to be healing the same area no matter what. And then she also has the added bonus of doing potentially the haste reduction on enemies and then targeting that one enemy who has done most damage and reducing their defenses and haste. So that is kind of like her benefit. Then on the other hand, Ludovic is able to do more healing. The healing effect of Ludovic is a lot stronger. And then Ludovic also has a crowd control immunity at the start of the fight, and he's able to stun enemies who walk into his healing area. So they both have kind of like their strengths and weaknesses. Based on kind of like these things, I would say that Velara is maybe more useful when it comes to attacking, because you can like plan the placement of your heroes a bit more better and be more optimal with the placement. But Ludovic is probably more better when it comes to defense side of things, because there are some things that you really want on the defense, like crowd control immunity at the start of the fight, or for example, if you allow the enemy team to use Rainier, then Ludovic can stun the hero that is being like swapped into your team by the Rainier, so that can be like really useful with Ludovic. And usually the heroes that are better for defense are more important, because for attacking you have a lot of different ways of winning usually. Here is one example where I was using Velara in this Shemira team, and I was able to win the enemy team. And then another example where I was using Ludovic in the same team instead of Velara, and I was still able to win the fight. So you can kind of like mix and match the two. And I'm going to show you a couple examples where I use like both of the heroes, and then the result is going to be same. Now I'm also going to show one example where I was using Velara and I was able to win, but when I was using Ludovic I was not able to win, and this was like attacking situation where we utilized the haste reduction part of the Velara circle and the healing part of the Velara circle. So in some situations, like I said, when you are using heroes that will go to the enemy backline, or like melee heroes or assassin heroes, then it might be actually quite nice to have the constant healing on the enemy side of the map, and at the same time having the haste reduction on the enemy team.
The battlefield, a state of art.
Accept this judgment.
A fog will settle over all of us.
I have...
The battlefield, a state of art.
I...
A piece